I'm sure I've said it to you guys before, but I'm going to remind you that frequently the sermons that preachers preach are the ones that they need to hear. Have you ever had a moment where you're listening to someone preach and you're like, wow, they should listen to that? You have. You know it. You're like, wow, that's hypocritical. The Holy Spirit will frequently give those of us who need to hear it what we need to hear. So we're going to talk about conflict today. Yay. Anyone ever heard the term Midwestern nice? Okay, so I'm just going to be full disclosure with you. Conflict is not my gift. I'm not good at it. I can't stand it, and I struggle with it. In fact, I would say the vast majority of the work that I do in therapy for like most of my adult life has been focused on my inability to like handle anger or deal with conflict. And a lot of times like, where do you think this comes from, Meg? And I was like, well, I was raised in the Midwest. I'm a female. And like my good Protestant upbringing says that you don't make people feel angry. One of my favorites that my therapist was like, oh my God, Meg, you're a mess. My favorite was I was talking, and he's like, and I said something about, like, my worry about falling is less about me getting hurt. I don't worry about me getting hurt that much. I worry about what other people think about it because it makes other people feel uncomfortable, right? And he's like, are you telling me that you who have the problem and get hurt are worried about what other people feel about you falling? And I'm not going to use the word that he used, but it's one of my favorite words, so those of you who are creative can think of what he said. And he's like, that's Meg. I said, I know. But conflict is something that we struggle with. The good news is people in the church throughout time have struggled with how we do that. And one of the reasons I think, because I know it gets used about me all the time, is you can't get mad and upset. You're a Christian. Have you read the book? Jesus is like the king of handling the conflict. Jesus ain't got no issues being like, y'all a brood of vipers and we're flipping some tables. Okay? So if somebody comes to you and says, no, you got to be nice because Jesus, feel free to remind them that Jesus flipped a few tables and sent a few people to you know where. I'm like, but churches often, we struggle with what we do about conflict, right? You know about parking lot conversations, right? Oh yeah, you do. I was having this conversation with my principal the other day because he's struggling with teachers because we struggle to share what is really going on, right? So we will say to somebody's face, oh my God, I love your haircut. And then we got in the parking lot like, what the were they thinking? You do it. You know you do it. We all do it. And we say things like, well, we don't want to hurt their feelings. Okay, then don't say it at all. So how we manage conflict is something that has been in the church since the beginning. Jesus is trying to share with them, how do we live in community? How do we deal with conflict? And this always throws people off. When I do marriage counseling, one of the big things that we talk about, one of my big three that result in divorce are money, religion, and how you fight. So we talk about, how do you fight? And you're going to have that couple who's like, oh, we don't fight. And I'm like, well, you're headed for divorce. I strongly recommend you don't even do this. Because if you think that you're not going to have conflict, you are having conflict. One of you is being bullied into silence. And that's a problem. The parking lot conversations are a problem because they stem from this idea that disagreement is unsafe. If you have a relationship with somebody and you feel unsafe having a conflict with them, that's a red flag. If we are in a church where you feel like you can't have a conversation with me because you're afraid I'm going to get mad, that's a problem. Because I've in some way communicated to you that I'm an unsafe person for you to give feedback to. And it goes both ways. If you are somebody who cannot receive feedback, that's a red flag, because it means that you have an internal safety of like, I can't deal with my own reality. I can't see it, and I can't deal with it. In churches, we are a family. We have to be able to talk about conflict, because there are a whole bunch of us. And let me tell you, if two humans are together, they're going to have a disagreement. You don't have a healthy relationship if you agree all the time. Something is wrong there. So how do we handle that? Because I'll be honest, a lot of divorce and broken relationships that I run into is because someone has not dealt with conflict for so long that they learn to hate each other. And this is what I say. I'm like, if you get to a place where you dislike somebody, it's really hard to come back from that. It is super hard. It is so important for us not to get to a place where we actively dislike another human, because to get there, we have dehumanized them to a place where we can hate them. And it's really hard to come back from that. Really, really hard. Is it possible? I don't know, maybe. I just ain't seen it. And I've been doing this a long time. If you cannot have these conversations, you will get to a place where you dislike the person entirely. And once you get to a place where you dislike somebody, oh, that's tough. So Jesus is here to say to us, okay, how are we going to do this? Because if we're going to live in community, we've got to figure out how to have these conversations. So, anyone had an awkward, difficult conversation with somebody? Like you're having an intervention? Yeah, I hope so. Raise your paw. If you haven't, come talk to me, because we need to talk about you and some other work. I will give my therapist to you. You can use him, because he'll say things like, that's really, you. And you'll be like, maybe it is. Maybe it is really, And then you got to do something about it. How do we do that? Because sometimes, I'm going to go back to the Midwestern nice, or this fear that what happens if somebody doesn't like me? Anyone else afraid, or just me? I told you this was going to be a very real conversation, right? I really struggle with not being liked. Okay? You all know it. You dealt with me for 11 years. I like to be liked. Is that a messed up thing about me? Absolutely. Yes, that is something I have to work on. Because if I'm willing to sacrifice what is right to be liked, it is not peace or justice that I am seeking. It's my own comfort. And churches are not meant to be comfortable. We are meant to be centers of peace and justice. And I'm here to tell you, peace and justice will not usually be a comfortable place to be. And it's not a very likable place to be. But I'll tell you how conflict feels for me, because I think this is really, really important for you to recognize what conflict feels like to you. Because when we can recognize those feelings within ourselves, we can start to manage them. Okay, so I will be honest. As conflict rises for me, I feel it physically. My breathing starts to constrict. I feel queasy. And I'm like, ooh, and I start to panic. Like I have trouble, like I go on a very linear mindset. Like it's hard for me to hear or think or listen to other things that are going on because I'm in survival mode, right? I just want the conflict to end. And in that place, I will do one of two things. Because this is lizard brain, this is fight, flight, and freeze. We all have our things, right? For me, if I can't avoid the conflict, I will fight. That's me. I've had one physical fight in my life. Ask me about it later. I know, right? It was in, oh, you want to hear about my fight in 7th grade? Okay, all right. Are you sure we got time? Yeah, the kids are like, yes! We want to hear about Meg being thrown over a bush! Because that's what happened. Okay, so this goes back to conflict for me and how I manage it, right? I tend to be an avoider or a fighter. Those are my two places to go. Okay, but I'm also kind of, I can be a very arrogant jerk sometimes. How's that? If I'm being really honest. Okay, so I was in 7th grade, teeny tiny, because Wesley comes by it naturally. My children are tiny by virtue of genetics. It is not because I don't feed them. They come by this naturally. So I was a teeny tiny 7th grader. And a teacher of mine had said, hey, I really want you to go to this conference. Like, we need more kids to go. It was a conference about female leadership in careers and stuff like that. But they really needed more kids to go. And she was like, I really need you to go just to fill up a spot. And I was like, okay. So I went. And along with the other people that they had sent several girls who were high schoolers who lived in a place called Mifflin Meadows. And for those of us who work in high trauma, high violence, and stuff like that, you know that you can't send kids to prison. But some kids have committed crimes that would have you sent to prison, all right? So 3 of those girls were there. And they were taking a smoke break. The person who was supposed to be with them was also taking a smoke break somewhere else. So 3 of these girls were high schoolers. I told you I was tiny, right? They weren't tiny, and they were high schoolers. And they were hanging out. And I walked out of this conference, and I could have done the logical thing, which would be just to avoid the conflict, right? But that would mean that I had to go around. And I wasn't going to do that. No! I'm not doing that. I'm going to go the way that I was planning to go. So I went the way I was planning to go. And they said to me, hey, you want to fight? And I said, no. And they said, why not? And I was like, because you're losers. What do you think happened? I went over a bush because there were 3 of them. I was little. Now, again, how should I have responded? Not that way. And then also I should have gotten the heck out of there, right? Did I? Because I told you, in conflict, if I can't avoid, I get in your face, right? I fight. So I got up in their face. Luckily, my mother and my sister is almost 5'11" and 4 years older than me. She can handle just about anything, right? Luckily, my mom and my sister were in the parking lot waiting for me, and they saw this all go down, and they showed up. Because I was up in their face again. And we all know how that would have gone. I'd be even shorter now than I am. Okay, so the reason I tell you the story is, 1, because the kids really wanted to hear it. And why not? Who doesn't want to hear the story of the priest when she got, nailed? But also because we have to recognize within ourselves how we respond to things. Because if you do not know how you react and how you respond to things, you will do damage. Clergy do damage in churches because we cannot do that internal work. Because we somehow send a message to you that we are unsafe. And you feel like you can't talk, so there are parking lot conversations. And suddenly the whole church is over at St. Paul's. And I don't know why. If we can't have those conversations, if we as a family cannot intervene with one another, we do damage. If you cannot have a safe conversation with your children and with your loved ones, you will do damage. And that's important. It is so important for us to be able to do that. So how do we do it? Man, I'm running out of time. I'm going to give you the real fast. How do we deal with conflict? We do it safely and with respect and with open ears and open hearts. And that's hard because you're already mad, aren't you? They've already done something, said something, you already feel something, so you're in that space where you want to be up in their face or you want to avoid it entirely. But how do you move past that and get to a place where you can have an open conversation. That takes work, and it takes prayer, and it takes breathing, and it takes all sorts of stuff of you getting into your space and saying, okay, what do I need to do? What is my stuff? Because we all have our stuff. What is my stuff? And how do we help address what is going on here? Because I'm here to tell you, some of it's probably your stuff too. If we're in conflict, chances are there's a teeny tiny bit of it that's on both sides. Teeny tiny. I'm not saying all, but chances are there's something that is your stuff. Listen in a safe place, not in a combative place. Listen. Enter into that conversation. Give space for that conversation. Sometimes it's not going to go well. I would love to tell you it's all rainbows. And once we're really kind and loving, and we enter into a kind and loving space with somebody, their hearts are going to be opened, and the world's going to change. A lot of times that will happen, because you will have entered a place where you're both human, where you're both vulnerable, and you're both willing to make space. Sometimes that will not be the case. It just won't. How do you deal with it then? Because those of us who are trained to avoid conflict and like to be liked, we are trained to appease. So if you have someone in your life who is mean, aggressive, you're scared, you appease. Right? Because it's not safe to let that person get to that place. You're not going to feel safe, right? You appease them. Is that conflict dealing with? No. You've all been in the church that has the matriarch or the patriarch who rules with an iron fist, right? You've all had somebody in your family who rules with an iron fist. Have you ever been in a significant relationship with somebody who rules with an iron fist? Is that dealing with conflict? No. Is it a holy thing? No. What do you do then? Because you will get to that place. And the number of relationships I've counseled where I'm like, this is not healthy or good. It's not a holy, life-giving, God-created relationship. Then what? Then you need other people. You need a community. And if that cannot work, and I'm going to sit down because I tired my stuff, because I've been preaching at you too long. Do you ever get, you're like, maybe, Meg, you should only preach as long as you can stand. Okay, so you will have relationships or people in your life where that one-on-one doesn't work, right? So when you do that, you need a community. You need other people that can help foster that conversation. Some of the people will be able to hear that. I'm thinking like family therapy level, right? We've done our one-on-one therapy. That ain't working. We've done family therapy. Sometimes that will work. Again, sometimes that will not work. We're just being real and honest about conflict, okay? We're being totally real here because that's what we do. Sometimes that's not going to work. Sometimes that person is not in a place to hear that. So this is really, really important because what Jesus is saying is stop. Stop. It is not your job to be liked. It is not your job to appease. It is not your job to enter into an unhealthy relationship. You are not a fixer. Repeat after me. I'm not a fixer. Because Midwestern nice people, we like to fix things, right? I'll just fix that person. Number of girls I have come in my, well, I know that, like, he did this, but I can change him. No, you can't change him. You can't change him. Stop reading the romance novels. They're all lies. They're fantasy novels, okay? Admit that they're fantasies. Let it go. You will not fix somebody. You cannot fix them by appeasing them. It will not work. So Jesus is saying, do not sacrifice your community. Do not sacrifice your church. Do not sacrifice your family. Do not sacrifice yourself. Set your boundaries in place. And if you have gone through these steps, and we're still here, then it's not a you thing. Now, do you get to do that from the very beginning and be like, I don't like them because they got dark hair and weird teeth? No. Right? We do not jettison people out of our relationships or our churches because there's something about them that we're just not comfortable with. That's not what this is. This is we have had a relationship and something is happening that is putting that relationship at risk. Because relationship is God. Understand this very, very clearly. The love and the relationship that we have with others is God. And sometimes that's at risk. And when it's at risk, we go through a 3-step program. Don't we all love a 3-step program? We do. We love having a list. So Jesus is giving you a list. Jesus is giving us a list. How do we deal with that? 1, we do it individually. 2, we do it in the safety of others who can help us stay safe. 3, if we can't do that, what do we need to do to save the community and save the relationship and save ourselves? Boundaries. There are times, I'm going to freely admit, there are times when people have come to me and said things that they didn't like about the church or other people, and I said, maybe this isn't the church for you. That's okay. Now, is it okay for me to do that at the door when they first show up and I'm like, well, I don't feel like you're really going to fit the mold here. No. But there are times, I'm going to be real with you, when people say, I don't like the kids making noise in church. There are kids everywhere. And I'm like, well, they're staying. So, and that's okay. Our relationships aren't necessarily for everybody. It is not your job to be liked by everybody. In the Midwest, we like to be liked by people who don't even like us. And I always say to the kids, I'm like, well, do you like them? Well, no. Well, do you respect them? No. Why do you want them to like you? I don't know. We are not for everybody. We are not cupcakes. We are not meant to be for everybody. The Christian church is not meant to be for everybody. Jesus is not meant for everybody. St. Anne's is not meant for everybody. Meg is not meant for everybody. God bless, Meg is not meant for everybody. That's okay. Because if we're so busy appeasing, we've given up who we are. And if we're appeasing, we're not living the gospel. We have given up the gospel if we're busy trying to make nice. Kind is different. Love is different. Nice, that isn't always for us. So, gosh, do you ever feel like I never know how to land? Okay, I do not know how to land, so I'm going to end with a joke, which is mildly offensive because I'm not really a drinker, but it's fine because the Episcopal Church, we have kind of a reputation for being, very loving alcoholics. Okay, so in your gospel, there is a passage about when 2 or 3 are gathered together, I will be in their midst. When 2 or 3 are gathered, there's always a 5th. Do you ever feel like, God, you need to learn how to land?
We want you to know that you're welcome to join us at 10 a.m. on Sundays. Please be sure to hit subscribe to receive our sermons.
That joke? Do I need to
We can't wait to meet you.